What's up, folks? Maximilian here, and welcome back to more
Arcade Stories.
compiled tellings of some stories that I've had growing up playing with video games, playing in arcades, and stuff like that. I'm actually going to go a little bit off of the arcade route this time and go over another story that is somewhat related to arcades and around the time, but is definitely doesn't result in arcade games. So this is a story that I've heard a lot of people wanting me to elaborate on, and I did so on one of the Yo Video Games Devil May Cry 4 playthroughs, and some people wanted to hear more, so here it is. Here's Max's Spiderman story. This is a kind of a creepy one, so you guys that might be jittery in the stomachs or you don't like bugs might want to back the hell out right now. But for those of you that want to stick around and learn some about my history and some of my phobias, listen up. So, I was working around the age of 19 years old at Electronics Boutique, in the mall, playing games, going to arcades, all this stuff. Love it, love it, love it. My dad takes myself and my sister to a Lakers basketball game, and everything seems normal and dandy and totally fine. About halfway through this basketball game, I start feeling super weird. It's a real odd feeling when just something just feels wrong inside you and you don't know exactly what it is and you don't know if it's all in your head or not. So regardless, I go throughout the game, I eat some food, and I'm like, I feel like I'm coming down with the early stages of a cold. So nonetheless, that continues, get home, everything's totally fine, and I lie in bed, and throughout this evening, when I'm trying to go to sleep because I have to work the next morning, I have these reoccurring feelings like, I didn't fill out my will yet, like I didn't do all these things I wanted to do in life so far, and I keep repeating and processing these thoughts as I am trying to go asleep throughout this evening, and I have no idea why I'm thinking this, and I actually consciously think, why the hell am I thinking about this stuff all of a sudden? And I start just feeling very awkward, I feel like I'm coming down with something, but these thoughts just keep emanating and reoccurring, and I don't know what to think of it, and I don't actually fall asleep until I would think 4 a.m. in the morning, and I went to bed around 11. So around 4 a.m. I fall asleep, I finally start to get some shut-eye, and I think within 5 minutes of actually being asleep, I get this huge, gigantic surge of adrenaline throughout my entire body, and I pop up off of my bed like a ghost has inhabited my body, immediately jump the hell out of the bed and start pacing the room because something is incredibly wrong, and I don't know what it is. You just feel so extremely weird. I don't know what's going on, but as soon as I fell asleep, my body threw me up with more force than I've ever involuntarily had, and I started pacing the room, and I did not know why. So, long story short, after that happens, I don't want to go to sleep anymore. I'm way too afraid. I feel like I'm going to die if I close my eyes. I go into the bathroom, and I feel something on my back, and I'm like, well, what the hell is this? Still feeling super weird about the thing. I check out this thing on my back, and I have this huge, extremely odd-looking bump on right the middle of my spine. Now, before this, I had lived in the mountains for a very long time. You guys might have heard me talk about that before. Lived up in the mountains of California for like 7, 8 years, even maybe to 10 years of my life, and I just grew up around that stuff. Never had any issues with creatures or anything like that, even though that stuff was everywhere all the time. So I get the next morning off, I don't go to work, I go to the doctor to find out what's wrong with me. I still had not slept at all. And the doctor's asking me all this stuff, and she initially tells me, do you have any odd, like, bumps on you or anything like that? I'm like, actually, yeah, I have this thing right in the middle of my back, and it really hurts. I didn't know if it was a real bad rash or a pimple or something like that. And the doctor looks at it, and she's like, that makes sense. And I'm like, what is it? She's all, you have a black widow bite right in the middle of your back. So, awkwardly enough, go all these years of living in the mountains and nothing bad happens. I moved down to the city, which is like the suburbs in California, Southern California, and a black widow bites me in the middle of the back. She said the stuff I was going through was the result of the black widow venom. When the black widow venom enters your body, it gets into your bloodstream, and it eventually slows your heart rate down to a crawl, and your heart eventually gives up. It just stops working. And the big thing that was happening during that evening was the fact that as I was falling asleep, my body and my heart rate slowed down as my body temperature started to slow down as well with everything around me. Once you fall asleep, everything goes into sleep mode, and you try to recharge the energy you have, as well as your heart. And while this was happening, the venom was getting into my bloodstream and my heart, and because I was falling asleep in that one moment where your heart rate goes to the lowest it possibly can get, my body threw adrenaline into my system and went, yo dog, something is extremely wrong. Get up, because your heart rate actually has to increase. And that's what she said. It was like an involuntary action of your brain to do that, because you had to get your heart rate back up. That's why you were pacing. And that's why you didn't know why you had to do it. So I was just like, oh my god. And she said after that, there's a good chance if you had forced yourself to fall asleep, you might not have woken up the next day. And that was a huge head turner. If you guys ever start going through things like that, this is my advice to you. If you start feeling really weird about stuff, having odd thoughts about things and you don't know why, check yourself for bites. Look around your body if you've been bitten by something really odd or something seems to be weird. Anxiety can kind of mask this stuff too if you guys have anxiety problems. But for the most part, it was a very strange evening. It was definitely an eye-opener. I felt like I was on the cusp of death, and I thought it was all in my mind for that evening, and it turns out it actually was. To conclude this story, the venom eventually wore off. It got out of my initial central nervous system, which was, because it was on the spine, it was actually really dangerous. Got out of my central nervous system, went back, started playing games to get my mind off of things, but I felt super weird. My whole body just felt stiff, all my muscles felt stiff and everything. She gave me some antibiotics or some medication to try to get it out of my system. But what I was advised was the fact that since it is in your bloodstream now and you survived it, there's a high chance that you might actually have somewhat of an immunity to some Black Widow venom in the future if you do happen to get bit. What's scary about this is that within a week after this happened, and I thought everything was gone, one day when I was working at the store, my entire body just stiffed up, and I didn't know what the hell was wrong with me. I could barely talk. I felt like everything inside me was swollen. And it was a re-attack of the venom. Since the venom remained in your bloodstream for a little while, it kind of kicked me in the face all of a sudden. Within 15 minutes, I felt like I was just dying, all over again. It was a different feeling than before. Since I knew what was happening, I was like, okay, well, I just gotta chill out. I had to close the store by myself that evening. That was a hell of a night. Nonetheless, it ended up turning out to be a very character developing experience. It's one of those things where don't take things lightly if your body's telling you to do otherwise, because your brain knows more than you do in many situations. And I'm sorry if this was a creepy story, guys. It's one of those things that kind of shaped me and my overgrowing fear of spiders, and that is why I will never play Spider-Man, and I don't like Spider-Man in the Marvel vs. Capcom games. Thank you guys very much for listening. If there's a specific story that you would like me to go into, or something around the arcades that you'd like me to develop into in a later episode, I would happily be able to do so. But if you enjoyed this one, please leave a comment or a thumbs up. My name is Max, and I'll see you guys next week.
Fire!